Tonight's gospel reading comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, the Christmas story. In those days, a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration and was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. All went to their own towns to be registered. Joseph also went from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea in the city of David, called Bethlehem, because he was descended from the house and family of David. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for her to deliver her child, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in bands of cloth, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn. As we've seen in the feed on our video, we see the many hurts, pains, also some joys and relationships being rekindled through words on a screen. Messages of hope and love, peace and support being shared by people right here in front of our eyes. I have to admit, when I started to think about what am I going to say tonight during this Blue Christmas service, I didn't know where to start because there's really just so much to think about. We have the pandemic that is absolutely raging around us. Friends, loved ones, dying or sick or already dead from this disease. We have those who we've lost for other reasons as well, but that seems to get swallowed up by this COVID-19. We have dealt with an extremely divisive election, one on which they keep still wanting to fight and to argue in spite of the lack of anything. We have the mistrust, the distrust of what leaders are around us, hearing different things, coming from different sides, concerns about even this new vaccine, this gift provided by the people of science, doctors and scientists, but people who aren't quite sure because the reality of the past is that these vaccines, that medicine, that doctors, that government, that people in authority can't be trusted because they've used them as opportunities to hurt marginalized communities. There's so much going on, and that's just three major things that on their own would be enough. But in the midst of all of this, we are being called and asked to also be, in a sense, secluded, to be isolated, to not do the things we're used to doing, be with the people we're used to being with, attending worship services together, celebrating traditional meals or parties, staying safe and keeping others safe. We understand why, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't hit us. This may be the first Christmas without a loved one. This may be the 5th or 17th. It doesn't matter. We still bring those memories back. We may know of people that this is going to be their last Christmas with us, and yet we cannot be with them in the same ways. So much going on. So much to knock us down, to drag us down, to wear us out. This is the reality. This is the life we're living into right now. And yet, as I said at the beginning, we can celebrate. at least in the promise, in the hope that Christ has never abandoned us. As we saw in the song in which we sang, that the light, though we may have walked away from it, the light never failed. That Christ walks with us, carries us, sits with us, cries with us, grieves with us during these times. Yes, we're finding ourselves with an opportunity to celebrate truly what Christmas is about. And believe it or not, a quiet, though screaming babies aren't always quiet, and a town busy with people everywhere probably isn't quiet. But let me say, a time of being more isolated, a time of being alone, a time of being apart from family and friends, a time with things being different is exactly what our Christmas story is. When you take away all of the fluff that we have built into the Christmas story that's not actually there, you see the real meaning and story and message of Christmas. This unwed woman, somewhere outside of normal places to stay or especially to give birth, alone with her soon-to-be husband, giving birth to this child whom they've been visited by angels to say, this is the Son of God, the Messiah, Emmanuel, God with us. It was loud. It was dirty. It was what birth really is. It wasn't picture perfect Christmas cards being sent out or crush scenes on our TV stands or whatever. It was real life. It was in the midst of oppression by the Romans, for they were forced to go register by the Roman emperor. They were forced to take this long trip while pregnant because of the Romans. The world was not at peace. Or if it was only out of oppression and fear. Soon after the birth, they become refugees, having to cross into Egypt to protect Jesus' life. Yes, we have a God who came into this world, who has experienced the worst that this world has to offer, and who promises that in the midst of it all, that is where Christ is. One of my favorite lyrics from a song is, wherever you think God isn't or God can't be, that's exactly where God is the most. Oftentimes when we think about where is God, we think of bright, beautiful sunsets, sunrises, mountaintop experiences, in a church, in a worship service, wherever it may be. We think of this glorious, perfect image, and that's where God is. That's where we meet God. But the reality is we have a God who came to meet us in the chaos that is a child's birth, who came to meet us as a person who truly was homeless, who traveled, who had to rely on other people for food, drink, shelter, who experienced what it was to be rejected by the people in authority, religious leaders, the proper people, mocked and scorned for eating and talking with sinners. We have a God who lost a loved one in Lazarus, who lost and experienced the pain of death through the friend and through the friend's family. We have a God who then faced extreme rejection, torture, and even death. We may feel that somehow we're not good enough for God. We may feel like we don't have our life together enough for God, that we have to somehow clean ourselves up or get over something in order for God to be active in my life. But let me tell you now, no, God has already come to you. God is with you. And God's love for you can never be taken away. So as we think of the different times and places and ways in which this Christmas is different, we can remind ourselves that the Christmas, the birth of Christ, was not fancy, decorated trees, churches, towns, streets, yards. It wasn't beautiful Christmas cards. It wasn't a million presents under the tree. It was God coming to us. And because of that, yes, even in the midst of our pain, even in the midst of our suffering, even in the midst of our hurts, we can celebrate Christ's birth. Because God came especially for those who are marginalized. God came especially for those who suffer. God came especially for those with broken hearts. Because God's hope, God's promise, is that because Christ came to us, we can have new life. We can have hope. So that one day, when Christ returns, all things will be made new. All pain and suffering will be wiped away. All tears will be wiped from everybody's eyes. Death will be no more. Viruses and pandemics will be no more. Hatred and division will be no more. We hold on to that hope when we are surrounded and engulfed in the love of God and the love of each other. Amen.